In this episode, Jim and I talk about what is the number one investment that he made that had a huge impact over time. It's probably not what you're thinking, so stay tuned.
How you can be the greatest salesperson on the planet.
Welcome to the Rethink Sales Show. My name is Derek Kelly. I'm joined by Jim Shorkey. And Jim, what is one of the biggest or most important investments that you've made that maybe at the time didn't seem like a big deal, but when you look back, you're glad you did it?
That's a loaded question. So I would say the most beneficial investment is self-education and self-improvement. And it's very interesting. I was very much opposed to that idea. And I remember I was in a bad place and I had a big fight with one of my people and just was really not feeling good about the situation.
Yeah.
I went home and the next morning I got up and I had this cassette tape. And it was Brian Tracy. It was a promotional tape. It was called The Psychology of Selling. And I was decidedly against self-improvement, self-help, all this kind of thing. I just didn't believe in it. I was already King Kong. But for some reason, I kept this tape for months, maybe years. It was in my bathroom, in the little basket in the bathroom.
Yeah.
And I got it out and put it in and listened to it. And it was life-changing. It literally was life-changing. It was Brian Tracy, The Psychology of Selling. And I listened to that thing, and I listened to it a couple of times that morning, and that was the beginning of it. And I remember going into the dealership. I had the cassette tape in my hand, and I said to my team, I said, guys, I don't know what this is. I really don't. I said, but I know it's something important, and I can tell you things are going to change around here from this point forward. And it gives me the chills. And so I proceeded into this path, and I'll never forget this. My mom knew about this stuff. She had this knowledge about stuff that I didn't have. And so I asked her if she knew anything about, what is this? I didn't know what it was, other than it was a cassette tape and it was Brian Tracy. And she said she had this thing. They came in almost like a vinyl book. Inside that vinyl book were 6 cassette tapes, along with a workbook.
Yeah.
And my mom had this thing. She was big on the flea market. She loved to go to the flea markets, and she would mostly buy stuff, and she'd sell stuff from here and there. But she was mostly buying stuff. She just loved doing that and meeting the people and talking to people. She just enjoyed doing that.
Yeah.
And she had this thing. It was Dennis Waitley. It was called The Psychology of Winning. And she gave it to me. And on the front thing was a little tab, a little piece of paper, like a sticky note that said $5. I never forget that. I tried to pay my mom for this thing. She wasn't having it. So I got that. The Psychology of Winning, it was called. And I just listened to it and listened to it and listened to it. It led me to the toll-free number for Nutty O'Connor. And I got into Dr. Wayne Dyer, and I got into Zig Ziglar and Og Mandino. And it went on and on from there. And then this book came up, kept coming up. Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. It just kept coming up. Like, you got to read this book. I got the book. And that led to other books. And I read, I would be not exaggerating if I said I would have read 1,000 books on this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I just did. I got old books, really old books. Some old writings, but also some of the books were really old, which I like.
Yeah.
The story, like you could buy Think and Grow Rich. It was printed last month, or you could buy a first edition. And I have one. It's not a first edition, but it's very old. My son actually got it for me. It's very old. It's probably in 1940s. I like reading that book.
Yeah.
No, I don't mark that book up. I have a book very special to my heart. I got it from our good friend, Steve
Gardner. Yeah.
Gardner, somehow connected with Don Green, who is the CEO of the Napoleon Hill Foundation.
Wow.
Somehow they were talking, and he talked about me and how many times I've read Think and Grow Rich. Here, Don Green sends me an autographed copy of a reprint of the original unedited Think and Grow Rich. Wow. And he wrote a little note to me, and he signed it. It wasn't autographed by Napoleon Hill, obviously. It was signed by him.
Sure.
But it's unedited. It's actually got misspelled words and stuff that's
Doesn't
even
make
the
full
wrong
sense.
word. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it wasn't edited. Anyways, so I have that book, and I'm working with a fella, Brian Hoy, and on Think and Grow Rich. And we're going through the book. I felt very compelled that I needed to read this book again. Here I go and get this book. Now, again, I'm not marking it up.
Sure.
But I read it. I just finished reading it for the 266th time. Wow. 166.
166, yep.
166th time I've read Think and Grow Rich. And it's amazing what I'm getting out of that, what I got, past tense, out of that reading. And one of the things that they talk about in the book that I have, the one that's an unedited version, it's almost like a promotion piece for the law of success. Mm-hmm. Are you familiar with the law of success? The law of success actually predates Think and Grow Rich. And the book was made as a result of the research. The 25 years, the 500 successful people, the whole thing, all the interviews. That's the law of success, which was actually a course. It was a correspondence course. And I have that book. I have it already, but for my next project, I wanted to get a brand new book. So I bought a brand new one. Now it's brand new. Thing's this thick. It's called The Law of Success. And I'm reading that now. And I wrote in the front of my Don Green Think and Grow Rich book, that's what I was going to do next. And I wrote the date and time when I started and finished reading number 165, start and finish reading number 166. And then next, I'm going to get The Law of Success. And here I am. I've started it. And I'm not that far. I'm like maybe 30 pages in. But this is a long answer to a short question, by the way. It's typically how we do things. But so you might look at that and say, how much money have you spent on books? Thousands. Thousands.
Yeah.
When I look at the Jim Shorkey Family Audit Group, what happened is a result of that cassette tape, The Psychology of Selling. Yeah. It's a result of that thing my mom gave me, which is Dennis Waitley, The Psychology of Winning, Dr. Dennis Waitley.
Yeah.
And it's a result of Think and Grow Rich and all the readings and Acres of Diamonds and William Danforth, I Dare You, and all the Og Mandino books that I've read, and Wayne Dyer.
Yeah.
I have just read on the average, and you can do the math, you figure I read on the average 3 books a month during this time frame.
Yeah.
Which goes back to 1993. March 1st, 1993, March 2nd, thereabouts. So if you look at 1993, that's 7 years plus 20, that's 33 years. Let's round it to 30. Well, let's say I read 12 books a year, that's 36 times 30, that's 1,000 books. Yeah. And if you look at, if I spend $20 on every book, it's $20,000.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of money.
Yes.
Think about a nice car for 20 grand, 30 grand. But that is absolutely the number one best investment I've ever made, because that led to the bigger money, which led to the bigger investments. Do you see what I'm saying? That was the beginning of it.
Yeah.
And so then I made more money, so then I can invest more money. You might say, yeah, but you're doing pretty good with your 401k compared to those books. I get that. But the books led to the 401k.
Yeah, they were like the strategy behind.
Oh, my goodness gracious.
Because we teach expert counsel, and it's
that's it.
There's probably books you avoided because they didn't align with where you were going.
Absolutely.
I think sometimes people learn for learning's sake. They absorb information for the sake of absorbing information, but you were strategic about
absolutely
what you're reading.
To that point, I love Og Mandino. And Og Mandino wrote many books, but one of the books he wrote is called The Greatest Salesman in the World. Well, I got to read that book. What does that even mean, the greatest salesman in the world? I buy titles and I buy authors. So I knew about Og Mandino. He was the guy. Writes this book, The Greatest Salesman in the World, which one of my good friends recommended it to me. And it was like, wow. And I read it. And actually, very few people do this. But if you know the book, there's a strategy to the book and a process that Hafid, who was the character in the book, that he followed based on his mentor. I did that same exact thing. I did exactly what Hafid did.
Wow.
And he was the greatest salesman in the world. And so, again, what value would you put to that?
Yeah.
And the return on investment is off the charts.
Yeah. That's good, because I think what you're talking about is you're recognizing, okay, if I can learn from these books that don't cost, it's not like a book costs $20,000.
No.
I can learn from this book, and then I seek expert counsel.
Yeah.
So when you had other people in your life outside of just those resources that you could come to, like Mr. Hamilton.
Yes.
Who was your dad's business partner, and say, hey, how do I do this? Teach me,
I
correct
did.
me, help me.
Absolutely.
It's like the books almost give you the foundation to start thinking. Then you're like, okay, some of them probably give you action steps of what to put into place. But then other times you're seeking expert counsel. So how do you decide when the book is enough expert counsel versus needing the conversation with a real person?
I think it's not an either or.
Okay.
It's a both. And I think you need both. I forgot to say one thing about expert counsel. So Og Mandino, to me, is expert counsel. He wrote a book called The Greatest Miracle in the World, or something like that. And I, of course, got the book. But in that book, he lists his, I think it's 12, but don't hold me to that number. There's a number that he lists that are his all-time favorite self-help books. And I said to my mom, because she was always big on Christmas, and I said to my mother, I said, this is what I want for Christmas. This is all I want, is these books. My mom was just, she was the type of person, she just nose to the grindstone. And because there was no, I don't think there was internet back then or Google or something.
Right.
She got the books. There were older books per se. And one of those books was Acres of Diamonds. One of those books was I Dare You by William Danforth. Success Through a Positive Mental Attitude. Think and Grow Rich was one of those books. And so the point is I got those books. I read them. I read every one of them. And Acres of Diamonds was written by Russell Conwell, who was the founder of Temple University. And he was a minister, actually.
Huh.
Yeah, Russell Conwell. Wonderful man. Wow. And I read that book. But that's the thing about reading 1,000 books. Most of these books I've read multiple times. Not like Think and Grow Rich, not that many, but probably some of them a dozen. So that's
Did
in
you
the
start to
thousands.
see patterns?
Oh, God, yeah, yeah. For example, Think and Grow Rich is a pattern. Not these guys necessarily, but
Right.
different people would talk about this. Wayne Dyer talked about it. Og Mandino actually worked for W. Clement Stone. Name of W. Clement Stone's company was Combined Insurance Company, Combined Insurance. And Og Mandino was the national sales manager for that company. And W. Clement Stone is the one that put the claim out that the book Think and Grow Rich made him millions.
Yeah.
And so that is, to me, very intriguing. If he can do it, I can do it. So that was another one of those hints. I got to get this book. And I remember very clearly getting the book, and it was a paperback, and that had his recommendation, his approval of it on the, it mentions him in the book, per se. It was obviously a modern day version of it, but he used Think and Grow Rich to build his empire.
Wow. That's so neat because you start to see the connections, not just between the people, but how they use the tools. And then you also see like the patterns that you were seeing. Napoleon Hill interviewed, and then Og Mandino did his thing. And then you start to see, oh, this is what success looks like. And then knowing Jim Shorkey, you made yourself a list and started rolling through the list.
Og
Right?
Mandino's a unique story. He was, sadly, he was a confirmed alcoholic. He lost everything. Was literally living out of his car. He was homeless. He lost everything. And this is pre the writings. And he decided that he was going to take his own life. He was going to commit suicide. And I don't take that lightly, by the way. That's what he decided. And somehow something happened that changed his mind. And he didn't do that. He was actually going to buy a gun, I think at a pawn shop or something. But anyways, he was going to commit suicide, didn't. Out of that, he started somehow working for Napoleon Hill, W. Clement Stone,
Yep.
and then the books, writing the books.
Yeah.
Imagine that.
That's such a cool story.
But
Yeah.
there's an example, just to tell you that this can be done. We can rethink ourselves.
That's right.
We can change the plan, and we can get a different result.
Right.
And we can.
Yeah.
And if Og Mandino can do it,
We can do
I can do it.
Yeah.
I firmly believe that.
That's so good, Jim. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you, guys. Just in this episode, you heard Jim name book after book. So if you're interested, comment below and we can point you to the book that Jim references and make sure that you have it in your hands. Jim, thank you.
Or
for
maybe
sharing.
also you could, maybe like was done to me through Og Mandino, we could send you a list. It's email.
Yeah.
So easy.
Yeah,
If
just
you
let
just
us
put your
know.
email in the comments,
Yep.
and we'll email you the list of these
heck yeah.
different books. They're wonderful books.
Yeah.
And I was going to say, when you think about what Og Mandino did, but then you also go back and think about what Napoleon Hill did, he did exactly what we're talking about. We're saying seek expert counsel. That's what he did. And two of the people that were the most profound influencers of the book Think and Grow Rich, number one, Thomas Edison, and number two, Henry Ford. And they were very important in the work. And he really spent time with these guys. Now, Thomas Edison invented the light bulb. What have you invented, Marshall?
Nothing.
Me neither. So I think if Thomas Edison speaks as a learner, as a guy that wants to learn, I think I should listen. Now, how many cars have you created, turned them into a working model, and then developed a system called mass production, the assembly line, to make this thing happen?
That's crazy.
It's nuts from nothing.
Yeah.
And so I think if Henry Ford speaks, we should listen. And by the way, there's a lot of aspects of Henry Ford. He was a total jerk. He really was. So I also learned from Henry Ford what I didn't want to do. But it's hard to discredit his genius.
Right.
He was a jerk. He was a real first-class jerk. Don't like the man. Don't like the way he acted. But as far as his automotive genius, it's undisputable. And there's a lot that we can learn from him about that. And then, by the way, sometimes when you're studying people, sometimes the most valuable lessons you can get are what not to do in terms of, I see how this guy turned out. I see what happened. I don't want that to happen. I better make sure I don't act like he acted. So that's another lesson, right? Yeah. But Henry Ford and Thomas Edison, it was 500 people.
Wow.
They created that book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
expert counsel.
This is important stuff. Yeah. I think it just makes you recognize like success leaves clues, like you always say.
Yes, it does.
Right.
Yes, it does.
And so if many of you watch till the end, you've been leaving us dolphin emojis saying, I've watched the whole thing. Do yourself a favor and let us know if you want this list and we'll get it to you.
Sure.
And
Happy.
pick several books off that list and say, I'm going to start with this one.
Yeah.
I'm going to do this one.
Yeah. And don't forget, there's a corollary to success leaves clues. Unsuccessful people leave clues as well. And so if we study unsuccessful people, it's just a question then of not doing what they do. And you really are on your way as well. So if we find somebody that's doing these 5 things successfully, okay, I'm going to do those 5 things. And if we find somebody's doing these 5 things and they're creating unsuccess, we look at those 5 things and say, okay, I'm not going to do those 5 things. So you have a list here, things to do, a list here, things to not do. And you start checking them off. And it's literally, I was talking to Kevin Price yesterday morning about this. If we look at life in general, it basically boils down to math. 1 + 1 = 2. And with that said, it basically boils down to probability. So when we look at these 5 here, if I do them, the probability of me being successful goes up.
Yes.
If I look at these 5 here and I stop doing these, the probability of me being successful goes up.
That's so good, Jim.
Now, if I do both, to do and to not do, the probability goes up massively. Yeah. And so it does boil down to 1 + 1 = 2. When Kevin and I talk about this, we talk about this in this regard. Everything can be boiled down to math. And once we understand that it's a math problem, we can switch that and say it's a math opportunity. And if we understand the math by doing this list and not doing this list, now we're talking about actuarial charts. We're talking about math. We're talking about probability. We're talking about percentages. And what can we do today? What can we do today that my future Jim Shorkey is going to say, thank you? And what can I stop doing today that my future Jim Shorkey is going to say, thank you? Thank you that you stopped doing that nonsense. Because look at where we are today.
Wow.
Okay?
Yes.
Yeah. You
Thank
betcha.
you, Jim.
You betcha.
Thank you, guys. Leave a dolphin emoji in the comments if you made it to the end. If you're interested in that book list, let us know. We'd love to get it to you. Let us know what you've learned in this episode. We love your comments.
Sure do.
We love your feedback. We'll talk to you soon.